And I'll just go ahead and jump in unless y'all think we should wait any longer. Okay. All right. Well, I am Katie Chesney, which hopefully you can see on your screen. This is an event that we do each year through an organization called Gathered for Guilford. And you may have seen that on the invitation or on the post and not have a clue what it is. And that's okay. That's probably true for a lot of people. But Gathered for Guilford is an organization that we began a few years ago to both care for and encourage and empower public school moms who are Christians and kind of want to figure out how to navigate their role as parents, their role as servants within the schools, and as community members, in the school communities. And so that is who we are and what we try to do. And so this is something that we do each year to help moms who are trying to figure out, what in the world do I do about school? What are my options? What do they even mean? And how do I make this decision that feels so weighty? And so before we jump into all of the details, we want to just acknowledge a few things that many of you may know and maybe you don't. But before we start, here are a few things. One is we just want to say that the ability to make that choice to say, well, I'm trying to figure out, do I want to do, this Christian private school, or do I want to homeschool, or do I want to do public school, or do I want to send my kid to the charter across town? Anyway, all of that is a privilege, right? Not everybody has that even as an option. And so we just want to acknowledge that even though this doesn't always feel like a gift, it is a gift to be able to have options and to be able to make the best choice for your family. It's a choice that a lot of people don't have. And we also want to just say, we know it's not easy. We have all been through this in one way, shape, or form. For some, it's easier than others, but it's never a simple decision when you have options. So we get that. We also wanted to say that we all believe on the panel that there's no right answer to this question. There are advantages and disadvantages to every school choice that you are going to have in front of you. And the thing that we would love for you to think through and to hear from us is that there can be both true and not true beliefs that guide that decision. And so that's some of what we want to tackle tonight, and in combination with sort of that practical decision of what are my options is also, why am I making the options or the choices that I'm tempted to make? Are they based on true godly wisdom, or are they based on other things, for instance, fear? So we want to help make those distinctions as we talk. And then there are a couple of things that I want to remind you before I pass it on to Melissa to moderate us for the rest of the time. The biggest one is that we have the joy and the responsibility, as it says in Proverbs 22, to train up a child in the way that he or she should go. And while we don't always know exactly what that means or what that looks like, I know that because you're here, you've been doing it. You've been speaking truth into their lives. You're trying to guide them and love them well. So I just want to affirm that. If you're taking the time to show up for this call on a Thursday night, you're loving your kids really well. And you're also seeking wisdom, just by showing up here. And the last thing with that is, in that training, it doesn't stop when you make this choice. It's a lifelong journey with our kids. I think sometimes we can feel like we're training, and then we get to school, and if we are putting them into a school, then we're just sort of going, okay, there you go, But realistically, you're going to continue to train your kids consistently, daily, moment by moment, in a lot of ways for the rest of their living with you lives anyway. And I think beyond that as well. So it's going to continue. And the Lord says in Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And we know, and we want to believe, and we choose to believe that's true for us. And so if we believe it's true for us, then it's also true for our kids. And so whichever path you and your husband or whoever you're making that decision with decide for your family, you know that the Lord goes with them. So those are just some things that we want to center our time on. I'm going to pray for us, and then I'll pass it on to Melissa. Father, we are so grateful for time to gather virtually in this amazing technology that drives us crazy a lot, but also is truly a gift. I think about even if this whole craziness had happened 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had this option. So even 10 years ago. So we just thank you for Zoom and for virtual meetings. And we pray that this one would be a blessing, that women would leave feeling like they have more information at their ready to make this decision, but also that they would just feel encouraged and turned towards you and what you have for them. So we pray your blessing on this time and on our conversation. In Jesus' name, amen. Melissa?
Amen and amen. So glad that you guys are all here. It's really fun to see your faces. I know I've said that. I probably will say that a couple more times. I truly mean it. I'm not just trying to puff you up. I get really excited about being with people. So even Zoom calls kind of feel like a party to me these days, which is really sad, but it's fine. We're going with it. So before we get too much into all of the dialogue of what each of us kind of have done or the panelists' questions, I just wanted Amy to take a quick minute to give us an overview of the difference of the definitions of schools. Because I know if you're like me, when you first started looking at these options for school, you were like, wait, what's a okay, I thought this was a neighborhood school, but maybe it's a magnet school, but wait, that's a charter school? What? So we just want to do kind of a quick little rundown of what the different types of schools are. And I'm going to let a professional define it for us, Miss Amy Gear.
That's hilarious. Before I do that, Melissa, would you mind introducing yourself since you're the moderator and might not get to?
I would love to. Thank you so much. Yes. So I am Melissa Lukowitz. I love that on Zoom, you automatically have a name badge. You know, you've got your name tag already there at the bottom of the screen. So it's really nice. You don't have to worry about like forgetting someone's name while you're talking to them, you know. So I'm Melissa. I have two wonderful children who have gone through the Spanish immersion magnet program. They are older now. They're like grown ups walking around my house in the next room cheering for games. My oldest is a junior at Grimsley High School, and my youngest is an 8th grader at Swan Middle. And those are they both went through Jones Elementary, and those are the three Spanish immersion magnet schools: elementary, middle, and high school. I'm married to a lovely man named Randy, who is also in the next room, and they can probably all hear me singing their praises. But we have lived in Randy and I were college sweethearts and got married and stayed in Greensboro. And we've been here and have loved this community and have really found our home here. I am a youth minister at our local church, where at Church of the Redeemer. It's an Anglican church. Jessie Merriweather is also on staff there with me, which is super fun to have her here. And I am really honored and grateful to be here with you guys and be representing Gathered for Guilford along with these lovely ladies. So, is that good, Amy? Amy's our boss.
Yes, thank you. I'm not the boss of anyone. Okay, maybe I am. My name is Amy Gear, and I have two children, both in elementary school at Sternberger Elementary, which is a public Guilford County school. One of them is in 5th grade and one of them is in 2nd grade. And we have been at that school our entire school career. I also work for Guilford County Schools. So that's why they sometimes call me the boss because Melissa and Katie are always asking that I talk about it. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to go ahead and explain in very simple terms charter, magnet, and neighborhood, because that's kind of how we're going to be talking about schools tonight. I'm going to start with neighborhood because that is the easiest for me to wrap my head around, because that's how I grew up, and I'm assuming a lot of you did too. When you were little, you found out what the neighborhood school was and you went. There wasn't, at least where I was from, a lot of choice. So neighborhood schools are Guilford County School System schools. They are a part of much larger thing. We have 69 elementary neighborhood schools in Guilford County Schools, so it's very large. Back in the 80s and early 90s, there actually used to be Greensboro City Schools, High Point City Schools, and Guilford County Schools. There were 3 different school systems, but in 1993, they merged into one that's now called Guilford County Schools. So overall, it is a huge system. It's I think the third largest in the state. And when you look nationally, I think we're in like the 49th largest in the country. So we are a really big school system that until you're in one, you don't even and can't quite grasp what that means, but it's a big deal. So neighborhood school is based on your home address, the child's home address. There are zones all throughout the county, and you are assigned to that school. Also within Guilford County Schools are something called magnet, or also sometimes they're called choice schools. And those are schools that Guilford County Schools has identified as having a specific theme, I guess you can say, that sets them apart. So science and technology, or performing arts, or Spanish immersion, or global studies, right? There's these different types of themes. And those schools have an application process that you have to fill out, and you say what you're interested in, and then you can get into them based on a lottery system. So it truly is luck. It's a numbers game. There's a certain number of slots. It's easier as a kindergartner. It's much harder as a fourth or fifth grader to get into those types of schools. But those exist within that Guilford County public school system that I talked about. The majority of magnet schools have some neighborhood composition as well as some magnet composition. So I'll use General Green as an example. They have some kids that attend General Green because they live in that neighborhood of Guilford Hills or surrounding area. And then they have a certain number of kids who come from other neighborhoods because they got into that magnet program. There are just one or two schools that are 100% magnet. The one that is in most people are familiar with is Brooks Global Studies. They have no neighborhood boundary, no zoned kids that go there. 100% of their children are lottery to get into the magnet. Okay, and then lastly is charter, and I may have to rely on Tiana a little bit for this. Charter schools are a little bit harder to understand because they are still public in nature in that their funding source is a public source. However, they are not part of the Guilford County school system. They are separate from that. So if the superintendent of Guilford County Schools makes a decision, that decision does not infiltrate that charter school. The charters are separate. It is a group of people who have applied for and gotten funding and a charter to run their own school. So each one can operate somewhat independently. With that being said, some charter schools are part of a bigger system. So for example, Greensboro Academy on Battleground Avenue, where it causes a traffic jam in the mornings, they are part of a much larger thing called Heritage Schools, I think. And there are other of those across the country. Tiana, did you want to add anything to the charter school horrible description I just did, boss, too?
No, that was good. It's National Heritage Academy, and they are all over the world. I mean, all over United States. So they do basically the charter, the board. They basically hire this company to come in and run the school. That's kind of how it works when you have the NHA schools. But then there's other like small entity charters throughout Guilford County as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay. I think, Melissa, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay, great. So I want to actually go ahead and start with Tiana because it's just fun. I don't know. Yeah.
Good.
You've been doing calls all day anyway, right? So
I know, might as well keep going.
rolling with it. Yeah.
It's
So
fun.
first of all, we would love for you to kind of tell us a little bit about you and your family and your decision-making process.
Okay. So my name is Tiana Pitts, and a little bit of my background. I'm in education. I just actually celebrated 17 years in education. Just gave my age there, so which is crazy. I started off being a 7th grade middle school math teacher in Guilford County Schools, and then I transitioned into administration and spent my 5 years in administration with National Heritage Academy. So we were just referencing the Charter School Network. So I worked for the Charter School Network and worked at 2 of their schools. One was in Raleigh as a third through 5th grade assistant principal, and then transferred to Greensboro and helped open up Gate City Charter School, which is also one of their schools. About a year and a half ago, I transitioned back to public school and decided I wanted to coach beginning teachers. So I have one of the best jobs out there, which is I get to walk alongside first year teachers and coach and help them grow in their first year of teaching. So I have 2 little ones, 7 and 5, kindergarten and 2nd grade. And the end is we were at Cornerstone Charter School, but the process was crazy. I guess being an educator was just all in my head. There's so many things out there. There's so many choices. And like I think Amy said, like I grew up in the neighborhood school. I went to the school. There was no choice. But then now you have all these choices. And so as an educator, I know too much. And so I'm trying to figure out what's the best in every single area. And what I did is I applied everywhere. I just felt like if I have a choice, let's try to see how many choices I really do have once the
Right.
lottery happens. And so we actually applied to, I was currently at Gate City, so that was automatic, she could get in. We applied to Cornerstone, we applied to Jones as our magnet school for public. We applied to Greensboro Academy, we applied to Summerfield. Like we applied to everything just to see what our options really were when it was time to make a decision. And
That's a
what I
lot
just
of choices. It's a lot
It
of
is a lot of
choices to give
choices, but
yourself.
you
Yeah.
really don't have choices unless you apply.
Right.
So,
That's right.
yeah.
Okay. So with that being said, tell us a little bit about how, like, a difficulty within the choice that you made.
So I think in all of it, it's like you can get way too wrapped up in analyzing schools. I mean, you can get way too wrapped up in, okay, is my neighborhood school, do they have the best scores? Do they have the best discipline? Like all the things that come into play, you can really get way too wrapped up in it. And you just can't really control any of it. And ultimately, I think going through the process of being just a teacher coach as well, it just really matters who's in front of your kid. If that particular teacher is ready to grow and help your child, you could be at any school, and so I think the difficulty is that you are literally handing your child over and trusting that each year you pray that the person that's in front of your child is going to care about them as much as you do. I just did a PD today with beginning teachers about them making sure that they showed parents how that they care, because I think a lot of people come in with their own baggage of schooling and what they experienced schooling was. And so you kind of have a defense in that relationship with teachers and parents. And so it's just super important that we all kind of come together and make sure we're all on the same page, that we care about this kid, we want to see him grow. But yeah, I would say the difficulty was just like, you can get way too wrapped up in trying to figure out what the best decision is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like it's I remember just being reassured by the thought, like, you know what, we're going to take this a year at a time. And if it's not
Exactly.
a great fit, then we reevaluate. Like
Right.
it's not, I remember when my oldest was getting ready for kindergarten, just thinking like, this is going to be like a, either make it or break it for her life. And
I
just
know you feel like every
realizing,
moment's like that.
right,
Like
like,
he can't do
no,
this
it's
right this
not.
day. Yeah.
Right.
Get out
Like,
of your
let's
head.
just take it right. It feels like that though, a lot of the
It
time when you're
does.
first making that decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. Okay.
And I think,
So
can I say one
you
more
went, yes, please.
thing? I just think that ultimately, like if you're a parent that's involved, there's not one single teacher that wakes up and says, I don't want to be a good teacher today. There's just not. And so if you're a parent that's involved, be nice, care for the teacher. I think you'll be surprised. There's just not teachers that are waking up don't want to be successful, just like they want your kid to be successful. So if we all can just get on the same page and be able to share that with each other, I think that's like we're good, So
Yeah, that's huge. That's totally a huge thing because I feel like they already struggle so much with all the pressure and the unknowns that they are under. And so when we kind of come out of blazing, it's just another layer of frustration
Yep.
and feeling
Yep.
like the struggle, just all of the struggle. Okay, so last question. That's kind of we'll do this and well, you can split it up if you want, but
You can keep going.
one blessing and or last year we were like, this needs to be 2 in 1, this question, but one thing that God has taught you or shown you / one blessing in the process of having your children in public education. Katie, do you want to say anything about
Yeah,
it?
can I just throw one thing in there too? I would love for you to talk a little more specifically about charter school, just because I think people want to know like how is that experience different from any other type of school? So maybe some of that blessing and difficulty might be sort of centered around like why, might not be,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So some of the differences I think that's huge is like my kids can't get on a bus outside my door and go to school. Like I have to drive them wherever the school is, and the school is all the way at the airport, so it's a good 20-minute drive for us every day. Some schools are different with lunches, but by law they're all supposed to offer free and reduced lunch if a student needs it. But it's just a different process. You don't walk into a lunchroom in some of the schools. It is, like we said earlier, it's a small entity. So you make your own decisions, you have a board, but just like any other board, you have to make sure a board is representing you or representing the kids that go to the school. So you kind of have to be, I personally feel like you have to be involved and make sure that that's happening well as well. And then, for example, Cornerstone is K-12. They offer kindergarten through 12th grade. That was honestly one of the decisions, one of the reasons why we chose Cornerstone is because it was like, if we make this decision and don't have to go through this decision making again, I'm for it. And if we like it, we'll just stay forever. But
right, one and done.
And done. So I'm still praying like we just stay, don't have to make any more decisions. But the NHA schools are K-8, and so you would then have a high school, which, oh my gosh, y'all, the high school options in Guilford County schools is top notch, by the way. So I think those are the main differences, is that like you have to take the kid to school. Lunches might be a little different depending on where you are. They make their own decisions. So when you see like Guilford County schools are closed, that's not you. Like you still have to get a separate call from your particular school, and they might still have school because it's just drivers and it's not buses that are, driving on different heights and roads. I'm trying to think, am I missing anything?
No, the only thing I was going to say is that it's even more magnified. I feel like the difference is because of the pandemic. And so just the differences of how we're choosing to do school is very different for a charter school versus, GCS schools. So that's another difference.
A little long, but
we still want to hear your blessing and your thing that you've learned. Yeah.
I feel like my blessing is, I personally just think it's been really neat to have classmates all over Greensboro instead of just where we live. My kids kind of get to experience kids all over Greensboro. And I feel like it can, I feel like now the lottery is pretty tight as far as how the lottery is ran by the state. The state requires there's a third party that does lotteries now, that those particular schools are starting to get a lot more diverse. And so like, I appreciate that my kids' class is pretty diverse, ethnically and also all over Greensboro. That's a blessing. I think just through this whole process, one of the hardest parts was just like God teaching me to let go. Like no matter how much control I think I really do have, I really don't. I just knew that my daughter was going to Jones. Like that's what she was going to do. And Isaiah was going to be behind her. And that's not what happened. Like it was a no-go. And we got the call for Cornerstone the day after they opened. My daughter was at open house at her new school. It was just like, you really don't have control. But we're happy, and God
Yeah.
takes care of them. I dropped off Isaiah for the first time this year because he's been virtual. We chose the virtual option, and like I walked out, not even thinking like I was gonna shed a tear. Right? Like, what am I doing? Why am I crying? But it was a moment of like, I'm handing him over to other people, and I can't control that. That's God's work. So I
Yeah.
think he teaches me all the time that I can't control it all. So
Yeah, for sure. It's such a good, such, such truth. I feel
yeah.
like we learn more through parenting about just so
Whew.
much, so much.
I'm sure you're
Oh,
learning a whole
woo!
new stage with like teenagers, but
Oh,
I'm like
yeah, girl.
forever.
But yeah, we had to pick up something from Swan today, and it was the first time that we've been back. And Asher, when we were driving up, my son, he was like, I wouldn't have ever thought that I would actually be really excited to see my school. And just that distance from not going for so long, they're just, they're really missing it. So anyway, yeah, the driving back and seeing the school today, I was like, anyway. Okay, so thank you so much, Tiana. We so value your perspective and your opinion, and we just appreciate you being here after a long day.
Thank you. No problem.
And I would love to go over to my beautiful friend, Jessie Merriweather, who also needs to be applauded because she has a brand new baby, her third. And she has been on maternity leave for the last little bit. And we are so glad that she was willing to join us tonight, especially with having three littles at home. So, Jessie, I will let you give us a little introduction about who you are and your decision making process to start us off.
Yeah. I'm Jessie Merriweather, and I said I have 3 kids. I have a 2-month-old, Hazel. My husband's on baby duty. And I have a 3-year-old, Eden, and my son Everest is 5, and he's at General Green, which is our neighborhood school, but is also a magnet school. And it's a magnet school where everyone who attends that school is in the magnet program. So and I'm married to Chris, and I work at Church of the Redeemer. I'm the director of administration there, and yep, headed back in about a week and a half.
We're all cheering. Just BT dubs. I know you're probably
like,
not
don't
ready,
tell
but
me
we're all
anything.
like,
Don't tell me. Don't tell
I've
me.
checked the calendar multiple times to see when maternity leave time ends.
Yeah, I got like, can you confirm what day you'll be back? So I'm excited to go back. Because I mean, I love my job, and but it's also hard. So, but yeah, my husband works with Wolf Homes, which is a construction company. He just started working there, was unemployed for most of COVID. So pretty much March through November was unemployed. So fun times. If anybody needs insights on the unemployment system, can help you out on that. And yeah, I actually had a friend that suggested, when my son was 4, that I should maybe attend. So they would have like the big magnet fair at the Coliseum. It's massive. It's a little intimidating when you go in, but sometimes it's kind of nice to know, okay, I'm only looking at the elementary. All the other stuff, all the middle school stuff, all the high school stuff, don't care. Like, nope. Does not
Yes.
apply. So it was kind of nice to just go to like the one section. And she suggested that I go before the year that we have to apply, because then you can it's a little less pressure. So that was nice. So I went a year early just to the fair to check it out. So then we could kind of talk about it and think about it a little bit more at leisure. And then as it was getting a little closer, I was thinking Jones, like we did a tour at Jones, and we were kind of debating, like, well, we had a certain level of, well, even if we don't get in anywhere else, our neighborhood school is a magnet school, so that's great. I mean, that's just lucky for us,
Right.
just where we live, because we live in Guilford Hills. And but we were thinking, well, do we want him to have Spanish? We want him to have this, like, what do we, if we're looking for our son, but like, at the time, we had one other child, and I was like, well, what's right for him might not be right for the other child. And I said, some parents can do multiple schools for multiple kids, and I cannot. So I need my kids to all be at the same school. And, this, just kind of that, well, what if we put him somewhere and that's a terrible decision for my other child,
Right.
just
All the
definitely
thoughts.
thinking all
Yeah.
the things. But we decided to go with the neighborhood school because of, I mean, one, we can literally walk there from our house, which is really great, but also because we wanted to be able to be involved in a community as much as possible. I mean, not every child that goes there is not in the neighborhood, but there are a lot. And so when we walk to school or walk home from school, there's literally other kids in our neighborhood that we never would have met normally, but we get to meet them and we go, oh, so and so lives in that house right there.
Right.
That kind of thing was really great. And being able to kind of expand and be able to meet as much as you can during COVID. So
Yeah.
we were, yeah. And I mean, so we honestly ended up not even, like, we made that decision. And I said, you know what? I'm not even applying to the other ones. I said, we want to go here. So I'm not even going to bother with it. I said, I'm not going to try and, nope, I'm
Yeah.
just not going to do it. So there we go.
I think one thing that I love that you said is that like you narrowed down like what was most important to you and your family, and like naming those things kind of clarified part of your decision. Like you knew that you needed to not do multiple schools. So like I just think that sometimes our decision can feel so looming, but I think it's really important to pay attention to those things that are most important about the decision that you're making for your family. Okay, so what would you say is one difficulty about your choice or your child being in public school?
I texted when Melissa texted me to ask if I would talk. I said, well, I have a kindergartner that started during COVID, so I'm not really sure what you want me to say.
That is so
um,
perfect.
but I mean, I think that, I mean, it's already been mentioned, kind of the idea of letting go of your control. Because we had toured other schools to kind of check them out first, like we had actually checked out Greensboro Academy and I mean, we looked at a few others. We were saving the neighborhood school for the tour, so we hadn't toured it, and everything shut down. And so currently, my son has been an entire semester in school, and I have never set foot in the school building. I have no idea what it looks like on the inside.
That's just
I don't like,
crazy.
I know what his classroom looks like because the teacher sent a picture. That's all I got. I could like peek in the window.
Yeah.
I mean, he left his water bottle at home today, and it's important that they have their water bottle because they don't have other things that they can drink out of. So I drop it off, and it's literally, you walk to the door, I'm like, here, and then, you don't go in. I've never seen The Office, which
So
when you're
crazy.
sending your kid in for their kindergarten experience and you're dropping them off and you can't even get out of the car. I mean, it's like the drop off line is like, you can't get out of the car, do your little kind of goodbye hug in the car, and then they're out the
Yeah.
door with their mask and they're and I'm going, bye.
Right.
So, and also obviously starting with virtual, but so I think that, yeah, kind of that letting go of ideas of what it should be, what it ought to be, and honestly just continually reminding myself to have to like take a breath and go, he's in kindergarten. It's kindergarten. Like, it's okay, which I think
Yeah.
applies to the pandemic specifically, because I know a lot of people it's really been hard to kind of feel like my kid's falling behind, but are they really? Because everybody,
Yeah.
it's just a different situation. I
Right.
think that it's just been that continual um communication, having to like kind of log through the 80 different apps and things and trying to do open house with a teacher on a Zoom call, and then having your teacher change 6 weeks in because the county had to switch some things. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Like what a
it's been
year
a
to
lot.
have it be your kickoff year. Yeah. So
Yeah,
hard.
but it's, what, but honestly, it's been fine. And Everest has been totally fine. He's loved both teachers he's had this year.
So cute.
He thinks it's just so great. And I'm like gearing up to tell him that his teacher's changed. He's going to be in a different class. And he's going to have different kids. And, I'm all worried about it. And he just goes, "Oh, good. More people. I can meet new people." And I was like,
A child after my own heart.
extroverted child.
Your extroverted
You know,
son.
yeah. So, I mean, it just going with the flow, honestly, and just
Yeah.
recognize that everybody's trying their best.
It's so true.
They really are. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So one blessing that you would say that you have felt, or one way that you've seen God like show up or teach you something, any of those thoughts that you might have?
Yeah. Um, I I've really appreciated, I feel like it's been limited this year, but I know, as things go along, it will become less limited. But I've really appreciated being able to kind of expand um, the people that we get to know and sort of expanding your community. Um, I work and go to church at the same place. So, it's kind of this. And, so getting to know other people and other parents is a little difficult, especially when you work full time. And so I'm not really doing play dates at playgrounds and afternoons to meet people. Like, I mean, that's just not happening. So, um, being able to meet other moms, and, even if it's just standing outside the school building with our masks on, going, "Hi, I've seen you 3 days in a row. What's your name?"
Right.
That kind of situation. And even just kind of briefly on an app going, and asking, I said, "Oh, does this person, oh, these two are related. Okay, cool." And like finding out, and I think that it's been really great to be able to find connections and find ways to join in with a larger community, and getting excited about that being better in the future when we can actually see each other. Um, and, to be able to potentially do playground times together or try to do a few things
Yeah.
like that. So,
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. Anything else you want to share to potential new kinder moms?
yeah, I think one of the biggest realizations for me as I was, kind of entering in, like, first time school mom for, all of that. And I think I realized that, unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of um opportunity for drama amongst parents, which I feel like I knew that that could be a thing, but until I was really in the email chain, I didn't realize the level. And I was, and I told my husband, I was like, "Seriously?" I said, "I don't want to do this." But recognizing just kind of how important it is to keep a perspective of giving people the benefit of the doubt, whether it's teachers, administrators, other parents, just taking the time to have the conversations. I think obviously things have been greatly exacerbated by the pandemic. A lot of parents feeling really fearful and worried, and teachers under extreme pressure, constant changes, and all of that.
Yeah.
But to be able to not just kind of avoid it, but also like how do I enter in in a way that is loving and kind and hopefully helpful. Sending messages to teachers, that are like, hey, thank you so much for going the extra mile on XYZ, or there's an app where they post like updates for the class or whatever, and the other parents are on there, and just kind of quickly like commenting like, thanks so much for thinking ahead for the
Right.
snow day and sending worksheets, like,
Yeah. Right.
whatever
Like
it
something
is,
positive. Yeah.
and then, just kind of trying to keep that perspective and trying to actively be loving and trying to build the community in a more positive way. Because I was really tempted to just kind of, I'm just not going to say anything. I'm not going to talk to anybody. Like, I don't want to do anything. But just kind of, on the side, like, well, maybe that's not really their fault, or
Right.
maybe they're really trying,
Yeah.
or maybe they're just really scared for their kid, and
Yeah.
that, and they're just really sad about all the things that they're missing, and all the holiday parties that aren't happening, and Valentine's candy that they can't take, and it's hard and it's sad, and just kind of having that understanding will probably, I mean, I'm sure that applies in non-pandemic times too.
Yeah,
So
for sure. That's such a good
yeah.
word, Jesse. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate your wisdom, because it's been a long time since I had a kinder. So all right, Katie, we'll switch over to you. And I know you already kind of did a brief intro about why we're here, but we haven't really heard about your fam. So
Yeah. I have 4 kids. They are first, third, fifth, and seventh graders. 3 of them are currently at Sternberger with Amy's kiddos, and then 1 is at Kaiser Middle School. But we have also had experience at Jones, which seems to be a theme around here, the Jones coming up. But my son went there for the first 2 years, and we really love it. It's the Spanish immersion school. And what that means, I don't think we've explained that, is basically just they are immersed in Spanish from the day one. They speak a little bit of English on that first day, and then they just begin speaking to these little 5-year-olds in all Spanish. And it's amazing the way that they become fluent very quickly. Within a couple years, I would say they're pretty fluent. So it was an amazing experience, and my son actually loved it and really thrived there. We chose, well, I guess I'm getting ahead if you didn't ask me that question.
You're
but I'm
good.
just going to
You
go
go ahead.
into how we made our choice. We knew that we were going to move, and so while we had always thought we would do our neighborhood school, because we knew that that was probably going to change soon, we thought, well, we don't really want to start him, and then so we said, what's the next best option? And we had heard great things from people like Melissa about Jones. And so we just said, well, let's just try. And he got in and we loved it. But when we moved just right around the corner from Sternberger. And it felt like the Lord was saying, this is your community. This is your neighborhood. I want you to be able to be present there. I'm a stay-at-home mom. And so I knew that, although at the time I had lots of little tiny people around my feet, I knew that eventually I wanted to be really present at the school, to be able to serve and be involved and all of that. And so I felt like he was saying, if you want to be present, then you need to be close, so you can zip over there for 30 minutes so that you can drop off that water bottle that they forget, Jesse, or, whatever it is, and to kind of get more into the fabric of the community and of the school. And so at that point we switched, and like I think has been said a couple of times, our kids are so resilient. It's like amazing to me that little kindergartners are like, okay, here I go with my mask, or, in the same way that my 5th grader who's known school this one way for all these years is like, okay, we'll spread out in the library, stick apart, and wear masks all day. And yeah, it's amazing. And they're doing great. Like my kids are 3 of my kids are in present school, in-person school, and they are so happy to be back. So that's been a joy to see. And it's blessed me.
right.
just as a note. But anyway, so we switched to Sternberger, which is our neighborhood school, and it is purely neighborhood. It's not magnet, as Amy said. And We have also had a little bit of experience with Lincoln, which is another magnet program that's for, it's later on, it doesn't matter right now, but point being is we've moved around a little bit. And so I think what they were saying earlier about you're not making a decision for forever. I think there's a load taken off when we remember that we're gonna make a choice for this year, for this child. And if it doesn't work, then there are other options. I mean, clearly with a lot of them, it's easier to get in. You know, if you're talking about a choice kind of school, then it's easier to get in kindergarten, but certainly not without options after kindergarten too. I think, well, yeah, well, I don't know. I guess that's all.
Yeah.
Enough about me.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, so you kind of hinted at a little bit of the tension of the difficulty of making a decision. But what other difficulty would you say as far as having your kids in public school? Has there been something that's to you as something that's been hard or trying, maybe more than like just the choice?
I think when I was coming into public school, I had through the church, sort of through the Christian bubble, you might say, a lot of messages about what public school would be like, what I needed to like watch out for because it's so dangerous, you know. And so I think coming into it, I was a little, we never really questioned, both my husband and I grew up in public school and really loved it. And so it wasn't a question of, will we do public or something else? But I do think I had this sense of, or this impression that was given to me about what it would be like. And I think fighting off some of that and some of the opinions from around me was one of the more challenging things. We felt confident in our decision, but feeling like there were people in our lives, messages coming through the church that would say these other options are the ideal way to do this, and that this one is sort of the like, if you're not willing to do the better thing, if that makes sense. I'm sure some of that was just in me, but I do think that that was a little bit of an internal battle for me. Not that I believed those things, but I felt like I needed to
like justify the two almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
kind of resolve, where do I stand on this?
Yeah. And so I think that was a little bit of a difficulty, but as far as actually being in public schools, I think what Tiana, I just resonated so much with what Tiana said, because I think it's just so interesting how we determine what we call a good school. I've thought a lot about that recently. I think so much of it is determined by the teacher that your kid happens to have. My kids go to an elementary school that I would say is known among white middle and upper class families as like this really good school. And it is a good school. I'm really thankful for it. But I will say we've had some really bad teachers and we've had some really great teachers. It's been both. And I think Tiana would say the same thing, maybe not about her personal experience, but like at Cornerstone, there are some amazing teachers and there are some like fine or maybe not so great teachers. And so I think one of the things that I think I've learned through the experience is the Lord is going to use where your kid is and the teacher that your kid has. And even if it's not a good one, there's so much that they can learn from that. And we've had to walk through with multiple of our kids this is what that looks like when a teacher is having a really bad day, and
Right.
talking, offering compassion for them, talking about what it might look like for them to love their teacher well when their teacher's not loving them well, or what it might look like for them to be a good friend to the kid who is being a jerk, which, I mean, again, that can happen at any school, but I think we want to protect our kids from the hard things, but honestly, if we think about our own lives, that's where we've learned the most, that's where the Lord has walked us through, and he's shown up for us in really tangible ways. And so I love that, even though it's hard in the moment, I love that my kids get to tackle those hard things and that I could kind of walk alongside of them as they do that and help them process it. If they hear something that might be against what we believe at school, then we can talk through that and we can say, well, actually, we don't think so. Like, here's what we believe and here's what we think is the truth. And we can walk through that with them and process. So I guess it's kind of both of those questions, Melissa, at
I know
once.
you
What
answered the last
difficulty and
two.
the blessing
You
together, you
did.
know?
Yes, I know.
So I really love that about public school. Just and I'll say one more thing real quickly, and then I'll stop talking. I think one thing that has been difficult for us at our school specifically, and that I would encourage everyone to think through and to look for is our family really values diversity of both race and class and all of those being in our kids' lives. And we are in a school that has a very low level of diversity, very low. And that's actually really hard. And so I think that kind of pairs with that idea of people think it's like this amazing school. And in certain ways, it is an amazing school. But what we call amazing and good does not always encompass all the good that your kids can gain from school. And so I would encourage you not to just look up the score, the what's it called, the ratings or whatever online and go, well, this one's good and this one's bad, because I think some of the ones that might have a lower score might have so much to offer in these other ways that you can't see by that letter or that number. So that's all. I'll stop talking.
That's such a good word, Katie. It's so true. The other day, one of my kids said, they were like, I mean, I know I've like stayed connected with my friends, but I really miss like everybody from my class. Like even the people that used to really annoy me, I really miss them too. And it was just interesting because he wasn't saying it outright, but he was saying, I miss the diversity. I miss the different people being in one setting. And that is really a gift that Jones has been to, or Jones and Swan and Grimsley have been to our family, is just the diversity in those schools has been a real gift to my kids and to us. So I will turn it over to Amy now to be our last panelist. And would love to hear a little bit about how you guys made your choice, Amy. And you can go right into the questions if you want. You know them too. So
Okay, I told Melissa to push me last because I said whatever time is left before 9, I'll just do it and then I'll stop talking. So our plan is to kind of chop off this panel at 9, and the rest of it is question and answer. So if you have questions, just tuck them away and we'll take them when I finish up. Before I talk about our personal experience, I did think of one more thing I wanted to tell you guys about Guilford County Schools magnet schools. Jesse mentioned the magnet fair, and that is something that looks very, very different this year. Typically it's at the Coliseum, it's a giant room and there's people everywhere, and it's actually pretty awful. So this year they're doing what's called a virtual showcase, and it is actually happening this week. So if you weren't already aware of that, just know that there is something in the place of that, and I would encourage you to go to the school you're interested in, their website. The elementary virtual showcase calls, they were these little Teams calls, a lot like what we're doing right now. Instead of Zoom, they used Microsoft Teams, but the elementary ones were yesterday and today. So the time has passed, but the plan is for every school to take one of their sessions. They had 3 sessions yesterday and 3 sessions today. They were all virtual. They're supposed to choose a recording from one of them and post it on their website. So if you didn't get to go to Jones's virtual showcase yesterday or today, but you're interested in hearing what was said, hopefully by the end of the week, which is tomorrow. It wasn't yesterday and today, it was Monday and Tuesday. I'm so sorry. My brain is crazy. Hopefully by tomorrow or next week, they will have posted on their website a copy of that recording from the virtual showcase. Don't show up at the Coliseum. Okay, so going back to my school
great.
choice.
Thank you for sharing that, Amy.
You're welcome. My decision-making process was much like Tiana's. We think a lot alike in a lot of ways. I applied to everywhere, figured I'd see what choices I had. We didn't get it anywhere, so we showed up at our neighborhood school. But looking back, I know that it was such a gift from the Lord, because it is, I, in my heart of hearts, feel like it is where we are supposed to be, and we love it. And I'm so glad we did not get in anywhere else, and I didn't have to even think about it. So sometimes it works that you have options and sometimes it doesn't, and just trust that. As for my blessing and difficulty, I'll put those two together. Um, I think for me, you feel like um, prior to kindergarten, you kind of get a little bit of directional choice with your kids. Like, you know who their play dates are with, or you know who they're with on the street, or maybe you just keep them in your house. I feel like you have a little bit more of this protection. And so my difficulty at first, I think, was just kind of what Jesse was saying, like, go, and I have no idea who you're going to be around. And that kid you're sitting next to, does he have a 16-year-old brother that maybe does stuff that I don't agree with? Or what's the language like in their house? And what are you going to hear? Like, that was a little bit like, you're just releasing all that. And I'm not saying those things wouldn't happen in a private school or a Christian school. But I think in my head, I thought that, kind of like Katie referenced, in public school, that was even releasing them more. But I have to say that that is also our blessing, because I love that we talked about all the cuss words in first grade when he heard them. And I love that sex ed is this year in fifth grade. So we've had to do all that at home already, because I know it's coming at school next semester, So I feel like while it may be hard, it's also so real world and so um, just life, and we just get to encounter it while it's happening, rather than keeping that protection and those hedges and those walls so tight, and then having to guess deal with it later. I don't know, I did not go to Christian school or private school, so I don't really know what that would feel like, but I do feel like I'm preparing my children for the real world, minus the diversity piece, which Katie referenced. That has been hard, and we seek that out in other ways. And then finally, I wanted to share, I don't forget what the wording of the last question was, but I'm going to say what my best surprise was of choosing public school is how many believing adults are in public school. We have had multiple believing teachers. I have met many believing administrators. I've worked for Guilford County Schools for 14 years, I think. So I've met a lot of people along the way, and y'all, it is densely populated with Christians. And that is such a blessing too, when you make that connection with your child's teacher, or a lunch lady, or a bus driver. I mean, whoever, that that there are other people. You're not just sending them to the wolves of all these people that don't believe, right? There are still Christians in
Right.
public school. So that's just been a neat surprise. And oh my gosh, it's 9 o'clock.
You're good. You're perfect timing as always. Okay, you guys, we would love to hear if you have any questions. Don't feel like you have to put your video on. It's totally fine if you leave it off. Just you can unmute yourself if you have a question, or if you would like to raise your hand on your little screen, you can. But because we have such a low number, it's fine to just unmute and ask away. We'd love to hear what you're pondering. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts.
You can also type it in the chat if you don't even want to do your voice. The chat is also open.
That's
We'll
true.
keep our eye on
That's great. And no pressure. I know that we just threw a lot of information at you guys. There is a whole lot to consider.
Doreen, we can't hear you. I'm not sure.
You had it for a second. There you go. Oh, shoot. Your audio isn't connected. I'm so sorry. You can type it in.
While she's typing, I just thought of one other thing that I think is a real gift, at least for our school. I know this is not true for everywhere, but we have several special needs classrooms, EC classrooms, and that has been a huge gift for, I think, a lot of students at the school, because not only do they get to do those students get to be a part of the classroom, and sometimes, or I'm not using my words well. There are some self-contained classrooms where the kids stay with other kids who are EC the whole day. And then there are a lot of kids who are in what's called, I think, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, or Tiana, but inclusion programs where they come into sort of typical educated classrooms. And so anyway, it's just been real sweet for my kids and for other kids to get to interact with kids who are different from them in that way too, and to learn how to, it takes some patience sometimes and some greater compassion. And I love when my little kindergartner came home and basically said, like, I have someone with needs, and they like didn't have the words to put with it. He was trying, but he was just trying to explain like they just operate so differently than what I'm used to, and kind of him trying to learn to navigate that in a kind way. So anyway, that's been a real sweet thing too.
It is so sweet. Okay, so Mary, thank you for your question. She said, I've heard only your first choice on the lottery really matters. And some people put the same choice for all three choices. How does that work? I'm going to let Amy answer that. He said nope.
Well, I should say I do not work for the magnet office. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I didn't say what I did for the school system. So for 9 long years, I was a school psychologist in elementary schools. And then 5 years ago, I transitioned to a position in central office, but I work in the early learning department, which is our pre-K programming. So I don't work for the magnet group, but I'll do my best to answer it. I know they do what's called a first round of placement. So they look at everybody's first choice and do that lottery. So say at Jones, there's 53 slots. I mean, I have no idea. I just made that number up. They're going to pull 53 people who had that as their first choice. And then at General Green, they've got 72. So they pull 72 people who had that first choice. So that kind of all happens. But then a lot has to shake out after that, right? So then those families have to say yes or no. And then as there are then these, like some schools that'll take care of their whole kindergarten incoming, right? If 53 people who wanted Jones got it and they all say yes, then they're done. There isn't a second round of placement. There isn't going back to the wait list. So as for I think I agree with your first choice matters, because I think so many of at least the programs that I'm familiar with in my kind of neighborhood area of town get filled very quickly with first choices. I do believe that second and third choice matter if it gets down to that. If there are open seats and they have to go back to the wait list and no one else has that for their first choice, then they're going to look to see who on this wait list has it as their second choice. And yes, you can be offered your second choice. I just don't think it happens that often. I don't think there's enough seats, and I do think there's high demand. As for putting the same school 3 times, I have never heard of that. I can't imagine that would help anything.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that either. And I will say what Amy mentioned too is when we were deciding for our kids, we were really interested in the Spanish immersion program at Jones, but then we were also interested in Moorhead because of the performing arts magnet program that they carry there at that school. And we really loved both, but we knew that Jones had like 100 spots that year for their kindergarten class that they were accepting. Moorhead maybe had 30. So playing it by percentage of likelihood, we were like, well, probably a better shot that we will get this one over this one. So it does matter, I think, a lot of times how many spots there are, as far as, and obviously your first choice is going to be your first choice. And our first choice really was Jones, but we also knew that putting Moorhead as our second choice, probably not very likely we're going to get in there, but also playing the numbers of, okay, but it's more likely to be accepted here, so let's go with that anyway. But yeah, that it's hard. It's one of those things where you're just kind of trusting as you wait. Anyone else want to answer anything else about that question?
I was going to add a little bit, just from experience, that if you do not get into the school, like you're not put on a wait list for magnet schools in Guilford County, you're put in a waiting pool. So now you're in a pool. And so when someone says no, you're not the first one on the list, you're in the pool of like a random selection again. So you like literally don't know. There's no like 'cause when you get in a charter school and you're like number 10 on the waiting list, there's a chance you might get in. But like with magnet schools, you're in a pool. We with Jones, we found out in November that we now had a spot. And so it was just like, nah, she's already started school. So yeah, just know the difference. If you don't get in magnet, you're in a pool, not on a list. If you're in all charter schools, you become a number on a list.
That's a great distinction, Tiana. Thank you so much. Doreen, we really want to hear what you were going to ask. I'm so sorry. If you can put it in the chat, if you can type in, we'd love that. But if not, you can.
I was hoping she was just going to start doing sign language and we would guess
I
what she
know.
wanted to say.
I know, really. That'd be amazing.
Do charades. Let's do it.
Okay, I really don't have anything at all. I was just going to thank you. You're so sweet. Oh my God.
Oh, you sure?
Oh, thank you so much, Doreen.
This is sign
That
language
was
for
very
thank
kind
you. We
of
can
you.
also
Yes, it's true. It is true. That's okay. Anyone else have any other questions?
I was trying to think if we could remember any of the questions that were asked in years past and that kind of kept coming up.
I think one of the main was what's the difference between the types of schools, and we talked about that already.
I think we've done this so much now. We're like answering the questions as we talk.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true.
I have a question for Tiana about charter schools,
Okay.
and then we can get to Mary's questions. Tiana, do charter schools have to do the same like state testing and state requirements that public schools do?
Yes, they do. So there's a state for 3rd through 8th grade. There's an EOG, end of grade test, math and ELA. In 5th grade and 8th grade, there's also a science test that's added in. So yeah, because they're publicly funded, they still have to take all of the state tests and still perform. And as a charter school, a lot of their funding, or like if they can stay open, their charter being renewed is based on test scores. And so, yeah, it becomes kind of a big deal.
Okay. I'm going to read out our next question. So Mary is asking if we can talk about how magnet school education differs. Do they still get the focus on math, English, the different subjects? Tiana, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think at the Spanish immersion, I know that they do everything in Spanish. They do start doing reading in English in second grade.
Second grade, correct.
Prepare for that, ELA component. The art school, all the other schools they still have the the math and the English component. They still do the same curriculum as the other GCS schools do as well. They're just going to bring the arts in or bring the global studies in, whatever that magnet is, it'll be kind of incorporated into what they do. But yes, you'll still get all that other stuff highly focused. And then as the less qualified charter schools,
I'm gonna read the question, just the recording, so in case people aren't live. Sorry.
Awesome.
Are teachers less qualified at charter schools? I've heard they're paid drastically less. That's a great question. Great question.
That is deep.
And that's back to you, Tiana.
That's back to me.
Deep in the woods.
So honestly, my eyes have been opened a lot because I've been in charter and now I'm in BD. So it's the same requirements. You can become a teacher if you have a degree. If you have a college degree, you can decide, I want to be a teacher. If you're hired, you will be hired on a permit to teach, or you will be hired in an emergency license, depending on if you have enough credits towards what you're teaching. And so same thing with charter. The person still has to have a degree. So they're not less qualified. I think that in a big county, you have a department that's a head over BTs, you have a department that's over HR. And so they're really honing in on making sure those teachers get the certain qualifications for licensure. And in my experience,
What's a
yes,
BT, Tiana?
I'm
What's a
sorry,
BT?
beginning teachers, sorry. I'm so sorry. All my acronyms. In charter schools, it's just a smaller entity. So that particular teacher might not have qualifications to be a certified licensed teacher yet, but they don't have somebody on them making sure they're on the right path to get stuff done, but they still can, they still can get it done. So they're not less qualified because it just takes a degree at this point to be a teacher. And then when they become a teacher, they then can get their licensure in their next 3 years. 68% of our teachers currently in GCS that are BTs, beginning teachers, are not licensed teachers, by the way. So yeah.
That's a pretty high percentage.
Yeah, I mean, people are becoming teachers in the middle of their careers these days.
Right.
It's just very common. I mean, I was too. I became a teacher my first year of in the business world. But yeah, so 68% of teachers that teach in Guilford County are in licensure programs.
Yeah.
To get their license.
Yeah.
So.
Do you?
So
I wonder
if you went to college.
The
I'm sorry,
pay-
Melissa. So the degree that you're talking about, Tiana, is just a bachelor's degree. It could be in Joe Schmo. If you have a bachelor's degree, you can
In
become.
communications, you can get hired as an emergency license or a permit to teach. And what that just says is that I can teach for just this year, but I have to start doing things towards licensure. And so that can happen in a charter school, that can happen in a public school. The pay situation, so charter does get less money per kid. So, but they don't have to pay for transportation. So it does kind of sometimes balance out. And they don't really have to share how much they pay teachers. You got charter schools in New York City that pay a lot more than the public school. I know the NHA first year teachers paid more than they do in public schools, so they attract first year teachers. Like there's all this marketing behind it. So you really just don't know what the schools are paying. I mean, it's not common knowledge.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Kathy. I'm actually a transfer we just moved from New Jersey about 7 months ago. So I lived in a town where literally there's one high school. You had no choice. And my kids went to the school that I grew up in, and their teachers, I was friends with them in school. We went to school together, and I was in my element. And then I worked at a charter school and I got them there. So right here, I'm so out of my element. I don't even know I don't like saying good schools, but what are the better schools where I live? I live in High Point. The kids go to Southwest Guilford Middle School. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to learn the name.
Right. There's a
So
lot of directions.
I don't even know what charter schools are around me, what magnet schools. This is all new to me.
So many, honey.
and I don't even know the area well. So for me, anything that's 10 minutes away is kind of far. In the city, everything's walking distance where I live. It was literally around the block. So I don't know if you guys can help with that. What schools are near in High Point? What are, I went online and looked for the reviews, because that's all I know how to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there anything you can recommend? I have a 7th and an 8th grader.
So you're trying to figure out high school.
Yes.
So I think the Magna Fair is probably the first place you need to go, just because you can hear the options. There's so many options for a high schooler in Guilford County. They're all great. Like the middle colleges, the early colleges, they are high school magnets. So they kind of push kids like, do you want to be in medical? So you need to go to UNCG middle college. It really gets really specific. So I think you should probably start with the fair. Sounds like your zone for your neighborhood school will be Southwest High School.
Yes.
You have a couple of charters. You got Cornerstone Charter, and you have Piedmont Classicals, another charter school.
Okay.
I can definitely tell you the magnet schools, you said about 10 minutes, whatever. The magnet schools might not be near you, but Guilford County Schools provides transportations for students that
Oh,
get
okay.
into magnet schools. And so that's one thing that you should know. As far as charters, you would have to take your kids to the school.
Okay.
But we'll leave our emails too. You're welcome to reach out to any of us because I understand that's a lot if you've just been here.
Thank you.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
is
no
so
problem.
much, so much. Okay, let's do
Thank
one more question. There's a question on here that I think is such a good question. Mary asked, when you are touring a school, what do you think are the key things to look for? And I think that that's a really great question, because I feel like sometimes when you're touring, you might not even know kind of where to begin to what to look for. What would you guys, how would
I mean,
you answer that?
I think it's personal, don't you?
I
think you kind
do.
of,
I will
I
say,
think
I
you,
think that at least for me, something that I had to actually, after the first couple of schools that I toured, I called my mom because I went to a public school growing up, and I called my mom and I said, Mom, how old was my public school? And she said, Oh, it was built in 92. And I said, Okay, thanks. So my perception of what an elementary school looked like was not what a lot of these elementary schools look like. And so like kind of initial shock, I was like, oh gosh, like, it's a lot of cinder block. It's a lot, you know. But then realizing, okay, they weren't built in 92, so
Right. They're
they're
old.
a little
Yeah.
older than that. And so kind of taking down like that visual, I think, expectation was helpful for me. But in recognizing that, I mean, that part doesn't truly matter. um, but I think as I went through the different schools, like I kind of thought of like, what are the things that I really care about? And if they don't um cover it, I mean, obviously we were doing it in person, so you could ask a question later of the person doing the tour, but I'm sure you could also call the school and ask. Like, I'm sure that that is an option if you watch their thing and then you have questions about things specific to your kid or specific to things that you really care about. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like it is one of those personal things. When we were choosing, we really valued creative arts and expression of performing arts. And so that was one of the reasons why we loved Moorhead. But then we also kind of felt like this gift of giving our children a second language for free felt like a real hard option to look away from. So we were like, yeah, let's go see what we think. And as we stepped in that direction, we're just blown away by how that program was, and loved it. And so it was a really clear decision. But I think that, the things that kind of seem like maybe no brainers to me might not be no brainers to you. Like I think that it is a very personal thing. And like for me, I wanted it to be something that was going to be really warm and welcoming environment, where I felt like we were given, people were seen, that my kids were noticed and not just kind of, so that was a huge thing, is that the teachers at Jones were extremely nurturing and very just affectionate, as very maternal. All the kindergarten teachers at that point were all women, but they were just, very much open arms, and, in all their beautiful Spanish, come in, my precious. I'm so glad you're here. Come in and learn. And, so that type of environment was really big for me. And so, yeah, I think it's totally a personal decision. Amy, I know you have your hand raised.
I'm sorry, I have so much to say. But I'm just gonna echo what you said. I think when you are, especially in the front office, y'all, Tiana and I have been in a million schools between the two of us in our life. It just being in that front office, seeing how the secretary answers the phone, how the principal walks through and speaks to whomever, like the adult relationships between each other are so telling. And then if you're walking down the hall, seeing how teachers interact with the children who are in the hallways, to me, that speaks so much volume about the community feel of the school, the social emotional health of the school, which it has to start there before really any academics can occur. So that's my 2 cents there. And then I want to say one other thing to Kathy. Kathy, I mentioned earlier the virtual showcase,
There are some sessions still tomorrow. I just checked on the website. So if you go to the Guilford County Schools website and then click on departments and then on magnet, you can get to the virtual showcase schedule right there, and there's links to calls. If that feels overwhelming to you, Kathy, I would encourage you to reach out to somebody on your administration. I just looked up who your assistant principals are, and one of them I love. His name is Tom Ehlers, and he is this very kind man who's been in Guilford County Schools a long time. So I would reach, even if you don't even know who Mr. Ehlers is, I would maybe shoot him an email and say, my friend Amy sent me, and see if he can maybe point you in the right direction for your children.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great. Amy, thank you so much. You guys, I think we're going to wrap up. It's been such a joy to be here with you all. And I know that if you guys have more questions, Tiana just put her email in the chat. And I'm happy to put mine there as well. And Katie, if you want to add yours as well, that'd be great. And Amy, same thing. So that if you guys have specific conversations that you want to have or questions that you want to answer, we would love to hear from you guys and be able to help you and steer you in any way that we can. The lottery does start starts end of January, early February, and they're all different as for when they have their timing. Yeah, it's in that window usually, and that's charter, Tiana said. So
Yeah, I mean, if the dates are all different throughout the whole county, you just kind of have to, if you're a year behind all this, you need to probably just plan ahead and get dates down. I literally applied for where my kids go. I applied the night of. I just happened to look and see, and it was the night that it was.
Oh my word.
I was like, oh, maybe I should check out Cornerstone. Oh, let me just apply. And it was the night of. Yeah. So
That's crazy.
write
Oh
things
man.
down.
As for the GCS magnets, that is different. So that's a bit that Tiana was saying how the charters are all different. The GCS magnets, the window is open now if your kid is age eligible and going to school in August. Those have to be in, I was going to look up the due date. Does anybody know it? March 3rd. March 3rd is when the
good.
GCS
Thank you,
magnet
Amy.
window closes. So you have a couple more weeks.
Perfect. Yay. All right, ladies. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on tonight. This was really fun to be able to chat with all of you, and please don't hesitate to reach out. And we'll stay on for another minute if anyone else wants to have any other questions or conversation.
Yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you.
We're grateful for y'all. Thanks for showing up.
Bye,
Have a good
guys.
night.
Hopefully we'll see you in person soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.